Did Ross Cullum honestly think he could look Liesl Obrecht in the eye, hold her captive in a makeshift laboratory, and somehow walk away as the victor in this twisted game of cat and mouse? It absolutely baffles the mind to witness such staggering arrogance from a man who clearly has not done his homework on the formidable women of Port Charles. To underestimate a woman of her intellect and ruthless survival instinct is not just foolish, it is a fatal miscalculation. How could anyone in their right mind believe that they could force a brilliant, cunning mastermind to build a functional weapon of mass destruction without her slipping a lethal trick up her sleeve? The sheer audacity to assume she would simply comply like some obedient servant proves that this rogue agent was blinded by his own towering ego. He played right into her hands, completely oblivious to the fact that he was dealing with a legendary survivor who has outwitted the most dangerous men in the world. For those of us who've been watching this program since the golden era of soap operas in the 1980s and 90s, we know a thing or two about character integrity. When we think back to the days when Caesar Faison first cast his dark shadow over Port Charles, we remember the sheer terror he instilled in legacy characters like Anna Devane and Robert Scorpio. Liesl Obrecht was cut from that exact same villainous, brilliant cloth. Over the past 20 to 30 years, we have watched her evolve from a terrifying antagonist into a complex, fiercely protective mother and grandmother, but she has never lost her edge. The writers today often forget the rich, decades-long history of these legacy characters, watering them down to fit a quick narrative. But what happened in this latest episode was a glorious return to form. It was a direct callback to the classic long-term storytelling where a mastermind uses her supreme intellect to outmaneuver her captors. Liesl did not just survive, she orchestrated a symphony of destruction right under the nose of her oppressor, reminding us all why she remains one of the most captivating figures on daytime television. Let us set the stage properly. For weeks, we have endured the harrowing sight of Liesl and young Liesl Injects being held captive in the dreary, oppressive confines of Windermere. The psychological toll on both women has been immense. Ross Cullum, a man who fancies himself a master manipulator and a formidable threat, believed he had total control over the situation. He demanded that Liesl complete the final weapon prototype, a project initially conceived by Caesar Faison himself. Cullum thought that by using Jocelyn as leverage, he could force Liesl into total submission. But if you ask me, that was his first monumental error. You do not back a mother figure into a corner, especially not a woman with the medical and scientific genius of Dr. Obrecht. Instead of crumbling under the pressure, Liesl's mind went to work. She recognized that brute force would not win this battle, so she relied on her greatest weapon, her unparalleled intellect and her deceptive charm. Liesl quietly and methodically changed the plan. While pretending to diligently work on the weapon prototype, carefully assembling wires and chemical components to satisfy Cullum's watchful guards, she was secretly constructing a masterpiece of deception. She built a fake prototype. To the untrained eye, and even to a seasoned operative like Cullum, the device looked absolutely authentic. It hummed with energy, its lights blinked in perfect sequence, and it appeared ready to unleash untold devastation. However, hidden deep within its core was not a weapon of mass destruction, but a highly concentrated, fast-acting toxin. Liesl utilized her extensive background in toxicology and biochemistry to synthesize a poison that would incapacitate a target almost instantly upon inhalation. It was a stroke of absolute genius, perfectly disguised as the culmination of her life's work. She meticulously crafted this Trojan horse, knowing that Cullum's arrogance would compel him to activate it himself. Throughout this incredibly tense process, Liesl Jacks watched from the sidelines. As a young woman who carries the fiery spirit of her mother, Carly Spencer, Jocelyn is no stranger to dangerous situations. We have watched Jocelyn grow up on our screens, evolving into a strong, resilient character in her own right. At first, Jocelyn was furious, believing that Liesl was actually cooperating with their captor. The tension between the two captives was palpable, a brilliant display of character dynamics. But as the hours ticked by, Jocelyn began to notice the subtle shifts in Liesl's demeanor. The slight, knowing smirk, the deliberate, careful handling of a specific vial. While no words were exchanged to reveal the plot, a silent understanding began to form. Jocelyn realized that the woman who once terrorized Port Charles was now their only ticket to freedom. The generational bridge between the veteran mastermind and the young legacy character was a beautiful nod to the rich tapestry of our beloved show. The climax of this storyline arrived with the swaggering entrance of Ross Cullum into the makeshift laboratory. He walked in with the unearned confidence of a man who believes he has already won the war. Cullum looked at the completed device sitting on the workbench, and his eyes gleamed with a toxic mixture of greed and triumph. He taunted Liesl, mocking her for finally bending the knee to his authority. Oh, how it made my blood boil to watch him speak down to her. But Liesl, ever the phenomenal actress, played her part to absolute perfection. She kept her head slightly bowed, her voice devoid of its usual commanding tone, projecting the image of a defeated, broken woman. She warned him, in a seemingly reluctant whisper, that the device was fully operational and required his unique biometric input to activate. She set the trap with such exquisite precision that Cullum did not hesitate for a single second. He stepped right into the jaws of the lion, completely blinded by his own ambition. The moment Cullum reached out to test and activate the device, the atmosphere in the room shifted dramatically. The air grew thick with anticipation. We, the audience, were on the edge of our seats, holding our breath. Cullum pressed the activation sequence, a smug smile plastered across his face. But instead of the hum of a cold fusion weapon powering up, there was a sharp, distinct hiss. A microscopic valve, ingeniously designed by Liesl, snapped open, releasing the fast-acting toxin directly into Cullum's face in an invisible, odorless cloud. The transition from triumph to sheer terror on Cullum's face was a masterclass in soap opera acting. He gasped, his hands flying to his throat as the potent chemical instantly invaded his respiratory system. The toxin worked exactly as the brilliant doctor intended. It bypassed his central nervous system, causing immediate and overwhelming dizziness. Cullum stumbled backward, knocking over a tray of surgical instruments that clattered loudly against the cold stone floor. His eyes rolled back, his knees buckled, and he collapsed to the ground like a felled tree, completely unconscious before his head even hit the floor. The swiftness of his downfall was breathtaking to witness. For a fleeting moment, there was absolute silence in the laboratory, save for the ragged breathing of Jocelyn Jacks and the calm, collected sigh of Liesl Obrecht. Liesl stood tall, her posture instantly transforming from defeated prisoner to reigning queen. She looked down at the unconscious rogue agent with a gaze so chilling it could freeze fire. It was a triumphant moment of poetic justice, a reminder that you simply do not cross the legacy characters of this show and expect to walk away unscathed. The mighty Russ Cullum had been brought low by a woman he foolishly thought he could control. But the drama was far from over. The sudden collapse of their leader sent Cullum's heavily armed henchmen into a state of absolute, chaotic panic. They rushed forward, their weapons drawn, completely unsure of what had just transpired. Just as the guards raised their guns toward Liesl and Jocelyn, the heavy steel doors of the laboratory were blown wide open in a spectacular explosion of sparks and smoke. Through the debris emerged the mysterious and powerful head of the WSB, known only as Z, leading a highly trained tactical rescue team. If you ask me, the timing could not have been more cinematic. Z, who we know has been working closely with Valentine Cassadine to expose Cullum's dirty deeds, moved with lethal precision. The rescue force flooded the room, their laser sights cutting through the smoke, immediately neutralizing the immediate threat of the confused and disorganized guards. The choreography of the rescue was nothing short of spectacular, reminiscent of the high-stakes action sequences we used to see during the peak years of the WSB storylines. Z did not waste a single second exchanging pleasantries. He barked orders to his operatives, who swiftly disarmed the remaining henchmen. The guards, realizing they were severely outgunned and outmaneuvered, dropped their weapons. However, their primary concern quickly shifted from fighting the WSB to the critical condition of their fallen leader. Cullum was lying motionless on the floor, his face pale, his breathing dangerously shallow due to the severe effects of Liesl's fast-acting toxin. The henchmen were faced with a desperate choice: engage in a losing firefight to capture the escaping hostages, or scramble to save the life of the man who paid their salaries. In a fascinating turn of events, the loyalty or perhaps the fear of Cullum's subordinates won out. As Cullum's medical condition rapidly deteriorated, becoming incredibly critical right before their eyes, the henchmen made their decision. They abandoned their pursuit of Liesl and Jocelyn, dropping to their knees to administer emergency first aid to Cullum. They frantically called for their own medical personnel, screaming into their radios. This perfectly orchestrated chaos was exactly what Liesl had counted on. She knew that by striking the head of the snake, the body would writhe in confusion. Z, recognizing the narrow window of opportunity, signaled to Liesl and Jocelyn. He quickly secured the perimeter and cleared a safe path out of the nightmare that Windermere had become. Taking full advantage of the distraction, Z escorted Liesl and Jocelyn out of the laboratory. The relief on Jocelyn's face was palpable as she finally stepped out of the oppressive darkness and into the fresh air. Liesl, though exhausted, maintained her dignified composure, a true testament to her enduring strength. They moved swiftly through the secret corridors of the compound, completely undetected by the enemy reinforcements who were too busy rushing to the laboratory to save their dying boss. Z successfully extracted both women, loading them into a waiting WSB transport vehicle before Cullum's backup forces could even register what had happened. The escape was a massive victory not just for the characters, but for the viewers who have been waiting for weeks to see these beloved women freed from their torment. As the episode drew to a close, we were left with a tantalizing cliffhanger regarding the fate of Ross Cullum. The story concluded with his survival hanging by the thinnest of threads. Will he live to seek revenge, or will the poison from Liesl's fake prototype claim his life once and for all? The ambiguity is a classic hallmark of excellent long-term storytelling. If he survives, he will undoubtedly be a severely weakened and deeply vengeful man, setting the stage for a massive future confrontation. If he perishes, Liesl will have permanently eliminated one of the greatest threats to her family. Either way, the dynamic of the show has been fundamentally altered. Z, Liesl, and Jocelyn have successfully escaped, but we all know that in Port Charles, the end of one nightmare simply marks the beginning of a brand new, high-stakes conflict. In conclusion, this episode was a magnificent reminder of why we dedicate our time and our hearts to this incredible show. To see a legacy character like Liesl Obrecht utilize her history, her intellect, and her fierce maternal instincts to conquer evil is deeply satisfying for those of us who have followed her journey for decades. The writers delivered a masterclass in suspense, character, integrity, and emotional payoff. As an older viewer who has weathered countless super couple breakups, dramatic resurrections, and shocking betrayals, moments like these reaffirm my steadfast passion for this daytime drama. The landscape of Port Charles is forever changing, but the core strength of its legendary women remains an unshakable foundation. I simply cannot wait to see what happens next week, and I know you will be right here with me watching every single second unfold.